Josh, thanks for joining me today. You're a sight for sore eyes.
Thanks for having me, Julianna.
How are you holding up?
I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. It's a little slow moving coup attempt, but I guess that's our new normal.
How serious do you think this slow moving coup attempt is?
I don't think it's serious as a coup attempt. I don't think there's Trump has a lottery ticket's chance of overturning the results of the election. The margins are too great. It is very, very, very serious, though, nonetheless, because there was a poll released this week by YouGov that found that 86% of Republicans believe that Joe Biden is not legitimately elected. And what they're doing is they're setting up Tea Party 2.0, nastier, meaner, more aggrieved than the first one. And, everybody should be very clear. This nonsense about widespread fraud is birtherism 2.0. You can't say that Joe Biden from Delaware, who's been a white dude who's been in Congress for 79 years, was born in Kenya. You can't do that, right?
Yeah, so what are they going to do?
But, there is always a reason for a Democratic president who wins by a significant margin to not really be the president, according to the right. Mm-hmm. And that's what this is really about. And it's going to be, and some of the people who are organizing these so-called Stop the Steal protests, they are veterans of the first Tea Party movement. Mm-hmm. It's very clear what they're doing. They're undermining public faith in our democratic institutions, as they've been doing for years and years, and they're making the country ungovernable on their way out. It's Josh, incredibly pernicious.
What do you make of the fact that the reports around President Trump sending out letters trying to fleece his supporters for more money, and then that money is going to be going, to the RNC, to Trump's private enterprises? Your thoughts about that?
I mean, there is no bigger sucker than a Trump supporter. The planet has never seen such easy marks. So yeah, they're raising money to stop the steal. They all know, and this is the thing that's so maddening. There are a dozen reports about how Trump knows there's no path for him. It's all a grift, and you have different elements within the Republican Party who have different motives for what they're doing right now. And one of them is raising funds to pay off debt. They're also siphoning some of that money into his new political action committee. I think he's there's a good chance that he's going to run, be a president in exile. And
Josh, you don't have the COVID, do you? You got a little cold?
Yeah, I hope I don't have the Rona.
I hope you don't have the Rona. Oh no.
I mean, I actually got a contact tracing call this week. It was really
balls.
Yeah, apparently I went to the doctor last week just for a routine thing, and so they called me up. They're like, "Yeah, someone had the Rona in the office when you were in there."
Fuck.
So yeah, I am isolating right now. I don't think I have the Rona. No.
No fever?
No, I feel fine. Okay. I have a test tomorrow.
Oh,
I think listen, Julianna, I'll tell you something. I made this choice. I was like, I'm going to wear 2 masks in the doctor's office.
Interesting.
And it was goofy, right? Like I had one mask over the other mask. But now I'm feeling good about that decision. I'm feeling good about it right now.
Ooh, that's interesting. We could diverge off into a conversation about inner guidance, but let's just stick kind of to what
we're to politics. Yeah,
I'm just glad. Just I'll be calling you in 3 days to see if you're all right.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
What? Speaking of Trump, do you? What can we do to implore the GOP back to the choice that voters made? Is there a path?
There's a time limit. The thing is that they are perpetrating this fraud, and it only has a limited shelf life. States have mandates of when they have to certify the vote. That varies by state, and that's by statute. And these states will be certifying their votes, and you know, they're 0 for 12 in these lawsuits. These lawsuits are absolutely preposterous, just ridiculous nonsense. There's a piece, I think it was the New York Times today, and it was just talking about some of the filing. So they presented 240 pages of affidavits from poll watchers. Was it in Wisconsin or Michigan? I think it was from Michigan. Yes, it was Detroit poll watchers. And these are these wingnuts, and basically they're not even allegations of fraud. They're just kind of grievances. So one of them said, yeah, the poll workers were looking at me funny. Another one said that a Democratic poll watcher had told her, go back to the suburbs, Karen. Which I love that. Like, yeah, that was good.
Yeah, but that's
not fraud.
An election. Yeah,
that's not fraud. So basically, it was just all of these Trumpers feeling disrespected, and they have a sprawling victimhood complex that's encouraged by the conservative media every day. So they wake up thinking the world is going to victimize me for my conservative beliefs. They're primed for that. So when they go down to the poll and someone tells them to go back to the suburbs, Karen, they write an affidavit. It ends up in a lawsuit. And then the judge is like, what is even going on here? So the end game is that the ballots will continue to be counted. States will certify, and they'll have to, all but the bitter dead. There will be bitter dead enders, right? We have multiple members of the incoming Congress are QAnon lunatics who think Democrats eat babies. So, yes, they're not all going to give it up, but most of them will be forced to acknowledge reality when states certify.
Let's talk about the Biden win. How are you feeling about the president and vice president elect?
Well, look, it is frustrating to me that even if we win, and this is a very heavy lift, even if we sweep those Georgia Senate races, there are not enough, and win control of the Senate, which would be a huge big deal. They don't have enough votes to get rid of the filibuster. And that means that for at least 2 years, the progress will be limited by executive action and what can be accomplished, in fiscal cliff negotiations. At some point, you need to pass a budget. At some point, you need to raise the debt limit, or else you default. And those, we saw during the Obama years when Republicans held the Senate. Well, we saw during the Obama years when Republicans were in the minority, they filibustered everything. You need 60 votes. When they held the Senate, you got things through these.
I was yelling at the TV when during that debate when Trump was saying to Biden they didn't get anything done under Obama, and he's like, I'm telling you had this, But Biden would have learned from that if he gets the Senate for 5 minutes.
Yes, if they get the Senate for 5 minutes, and yet Joe Manchin came out this week and said that he would not vote for killing the filibuster. So even if they get the Senate, they're not going to have 60 votes in the Senate, and they're not going to kill the filibuster. So I don't want to discourage people. There's an awful lot.
Well, actually, that kind of makes you feel a little better, because everyone again is getting all amped up about Georgia, and it would be an encouraging victory. But I'm hearing news, like I was talking about this yesterday, NPR, they're like, well, it was really a loss for the Democrats because they lost some Senate seats. And I'm thinking, who is picking this line of reporting?
It's maddening to me. And they didn't lose Senate seats. They picked up a net Senate seat so far, and they could pick up 2 more in theory in Georgia, but they lost a few House seats, that largely because they won so big in 2018. Most of the House seats that they've lost were reddish seats that they, picked up in a wave election. They were vulnerable seats. They had a lot of territory to defend. Now, if Biden had won by the 8.5 points nationally that the polls projected, they would have held those seats and picked up a few more. As it stands, Biden is looking like, when all the votes are counted and we have millions of votes still outstanding in places like California and New York, if Biden is looking to will probably win by 6 or 7 million votes. And for me, the really maddening thing is that Democrats win and they aren't able to govern. So we have a gerrymandered House.
Even when they actually take their positions. I mean,
they've won the popular vote in the presidency 7 out of the last 8 elections,
exactly,
going back to 1992. And yet Republicans have stacked the Supreme Court. How does that work? The Democratic caucus in the Senate will have won millions and millions and millions more votes than the Republican caucus, regardless of whether they have control or they fall just short. And, Democrats won by a resounding victory, but it will not be reflected in their ability to govern. And that's the maddening thing.
What kind of a potential do you see for Biden-Harris, their administration? What can they do beyond just fixing what Trump broke?
Well, first of all, fixing what Trump broke is a significant task. And, we've seen from Trump that there is an enormous amount of power to be wielded from the executive branch. And certainly they're going to repair our tattered alliances and all of that stuff. And there's a ton of rulemaking. We will have a Justice Department that is ideologically, politically neutral and run by professionals. And they will be facing a crisis that will necessitate that Congress comes together and passes a relief package. So I think that there's no question that having won an election on building back better, or whatever the catchphrase is, they're probably going to have a negotiate. I imagine in the first 100 days, it's not that Mitch McConnell wants to work with Democrats ever. I think the politics are such that he will have no choice but to bring a compromise between the House and the White House and the Senate to the floor for aid to states, for more testing, for COVID relief. I think we're going to get enhanced unemployment benefits. And look, we're also all of the politics is against the backdrop of this just raging pandemic. We're now completely COVID-19 is completely out of control in the United States, and that's going into Thanksgiving. Everybody's gonna get together with their family.
People are heartbroken if to make the decision to not go or to not see.
I really would encourage people, if you're part of the old what we used to call the reality-based community, have Thanksgiving with your immediate household and get grandma on Zoom. But a lot of people are not going to do that, obviously. And people are moving indoors. People are, lockdown weary, whatever. And we're going to be up to 200,000 cases a day soon. We're already seeing hospitals at 100% capacity. That's going to mean that the fatality rate, which came down, right? We had the case fatality rate, that is your chances of dying if you contract COVID, decreased from the beginning of the pandemic significantly as physicians figured out how to treat it better. And that's going to reverse itself if we run out of hospital space, because if you overwhelm the hospitals, your death rate goes right back up, even if you have better therapeutics and a better understanding of how to treat the disease. So we will see what it looks like on January 21st. I think it's going to probably be, or January 20th. I'm sorry, the inauguration day. I think it's going to be bad, and I think that there's going to be.
Josh, what do you think of all the masked people who were celebrating the Biden win. I mean, the right wing has been making hay of like, oh, we're not allowed to go out, but look at all these people partying. And I'm like, well, they kind of maybe have a point there.
Look, I don't understand why conservatives cannot grasp the difference between people wearing masks and people not wearing masks.
Right.
It's very simple. If you have a mask, you're wearing a mask. No mask, there's no mask, right? So if you look at all of these conservative protest gatherings, the White House, there's no masks. Nobody's wearing a mask. So, outdoors, maintaining some distance with a mask is a relatively low risk thing. Squeezing yourself into a Trump rally in a hangar with no mask is not the same thing. And I mean, are they stupid
the
or
CDC,
dishonest? Like, how do they not understand mask or no mask? It's not.
CDC came out yesterday and said, hey, a mask actually protects you. It's not just about protecting other people. So I think that they're incredibly selfish, and they don't have the ability to think in terms of the common good. So once you tell them, this actually might be good for you, not just your grandmother or your neighbor, or God forbid you don't spread it to a Democrat, which would be, what their great joy. Maybe they'll start wearing them.
I thought early on we should have had some sort of campaign where we said the mask defeated the globalists, like facial recognition technology, and they were going to, use the facial recognition technology to put patriots' names on a gun registry. But if you wear a mask, you won't get on the gun registry. Like, I think somebody should have done some sort of like white hat propaganda campaign, but that.
We're not.
Yeah, I don't.
We had our hands full.
At this point, it's a culture war issue, and that's thanks to Trump and Fox News and everything like that. And once something becomes a culture war issue, it's outside of the realm of reason. Now, I could be wrong about that in the following sense. Refrigerated trucks outside of hospitals with bodies being loaded onto them have a tendency to focus the mind a little bit, I believe. So
aren't people dying who aren't like people getting COVID who are like Trump supporters? I mean, I feel like it has to hit those people first, and they're still not wearing a mask.
Yeah, it is absolutely bizarre. And if you look at where the highest per capita new case rates are, they're all red states. I mean, North Dakota and South Dakota are the absolute hot spots now. The beginning, it was a blue state thing. Oh, it's New York and California and Washington. It hasn't been that way for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Texas set new records this week. The South, the Midwest has been devastated, and they're still not figuring it out. So, and it really is, once it becomes culture war, it's done. So I don't know.
It's nice because not everyone who loves Trump is wearing a MAGA hat. So if they're not wearing a mask, it's a little more obvious who to avoid. Anyway, we're seeing activists making demands of Biden. What do you think is the most important thing Biden should do when he gets into office to start to reverse this damage we talked about? And is it possible that the progressive wing, who is largely responsible for turning out and making this an overwhelming Biden victory, although everyone doesn't want to say it, but 5 to 7 million margin is pretty good.
Yeah.
What do you think about the activist demands that are being made on Biden? Are they worthwhile? Do you think they will come through, or the administration will come through?
I mean, we'd have to talk about specific demands. The thing, unfortunately, a lot of the work that they should do as their kind of number one jobs are not the sexiest things. They don't necessarily get the headlines. For example, and this just off the top of my mind, you need to reconstitute the Environmental Protection Agency. It has been absolutely.
I would make that the sexiest headline, showing leg and everything too.
I mean, people want to see laws. They want to see Medicare for all. They want to see, dramatic things passed. And none of that's going to happen. And again, this gets back to what I was saying earlier. Really, and it's very frustrating to think about this. We need to start mobilizing for 2022, because really the first 2 years of the Biden-Harris presidency are going to be fighting the new Tea Party movement and executive actions, reconstituting these agencies that have been absolutely gutted out, hopefully investigating some of the criminality that's been going on. These are super important things, but they're not passing laws. We're not getting a new Voting Rights Act. We're not getting any kind of new Green Deal, although they might end up embedding quite a bit of renewable energy incentives into a relief package.
Do you think he can fix the taxes? I mean,
they can. Well, that depends on whether they get the Senate or not, because you can do. There's a whole other thing, which is, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds. There's this process called budget reconciliation, where you can do quite a bit that isn't filibusterable when you have control of the Senate, and so that is contingent on the Georgia Senate races. But in 2022, you have a normal thing where Democrats tend to not vote in midterms, and Republicans have a midterm. Tend to have a midterm advantage. I don't know if that's the case anymore.
Happen this time.
I think that there's a very good chance that Trump has shaken up that pattern, and I also think that there's a almost certainty that he's going to be on the sidelines, motivating Democrats just by being an asshole, and
he's good at that.
And he could also declare for 2024.
Oh yeah. Oh, what?
Yeah, he could.
No.
I mean, that was reported this week that he could. According to advisors, he is thinking about, which, by the way, and this is an aside, that would be such a fuck you to Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz, and it would be in keeping with the one thing that I like about Trump. There's one thing that I appreciate about him, and that is his tendency to publicly humiliate the people who support him most closely. Like his most sycophantic supporters, he loves to hang them out to dry.
And they're like,
it's the only thing I like about him. And it would be that, because he would effectively freeze them out.
Wow.
That would be the end of the 2024 GOP primaries, pretty much, if he announced and started raising a boodle of cash, as he will. So it is possible. The Democrats have a good Senate map in 2022. It is possible. This is the best case scenario as far as I'm concerned. It is possible that we do not see the usual historic pattern in midterms, because Trump continues to juice the Democratic base, but is not himself on the ticket. So do those, irregular white working class voters, do they come out in a midterm when Trump?
How about we give them jobs, and maybe they'll remember that?
I mean, they didn't in 2018. No. Right. So it's possible that we'll reverse that.
A black person gave him jobs. It's different. I mean, let's be real. A lot of this has to do with race. Oh gosh, we've gone on forever, and this has been wonderful. I'm so happy to talk to you. I hope you're feeling better. And again, I am texting you.
I'm feeling fine.
4 days.
I'm feeling fine.
Okay. All right. Just making sure.
All right, Julianna. Thanks for having me.
We're speaking with Josh Holland. Don't forget to follow him on Twitter. As I said at the beginning of this show, Josh Holland's Twitter saves people. So you can follow him at Twitter, Joshua Holland, JOSHUAHOL. You're watching ACT TV. Look, my name is right here. If you want to follow me I'm over here. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I occasionally throw some good shit out there too.